As you probably know, corporate greed at Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast is trying to murder the OGL, the Open Gaming License, and replace it with the recently linked OGL 1.1 in an attempt to take a bite, a 25% bite, out of the profits of any D&D content creator who makes over a certain amount of money annually, and to potentially steal any of their creations without any compensation whatsoever. Well, I'm Kiwi, and as a GM of over 30 years, I have an opinion on this. The OGL 1.1 is a corporate greedy move inspired by suits who clearly don't understand nerd culture, who don't understand the power of the gaming community, and clearly can't understand that a combative stance with its fandom is going to impact negatively, massively, on its projected future profit margins. It's a move that effectively shoots Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, and D&D itself in the foot. Now, Hasbro, I couldn't care less about. The paper pushers at Wizards of the Coast either, but the creatives at Wizards of the Coast I care about, and D&D itself, yeah, I do care. I grew up with D&D. It was introduced to me by my parents when I was a little kid in the height of the satanic panic with the warning of demonic possession. So imagine my horror one Saturday morning when I was watching the cartoons and there was this amazing animated series that I turned the television onto that is the best thing ever, and when it cuts to the commercial break, the name comes up and I realize I've been watching Dungeons and Dragons. The horror, the guilt. And yet, every Saturday morning after that, I snuck out of bed, quiet as a mouse, turned on the TV, sat so close I was the only one that could hear the noise, with my finger ready to turn the channel at the moment's notice I heard the house begin to stir. And so was born my very first innocent rebellion, and a forbidden love affair with Dungeons and Dragons and the fantasy genre in general was born, that continued throughout my youth up until now. Needless to say, I love the game D&D. I care about it. I want D&D to grow. I've cheered its every success. I've supported every edition without complaint, reinvested in the books time and again to support the new system, taking it as a learning opportunity to improve the games I run. I was quite happy to hear the news and support the play testing of the up-and-coming 1D&D or 5.5th edition, if you're honest. That's all fine. I want their movie to be successful. If they're going to release a TV series, I want it to be not cringe. I already have early access to Baldur's Gate 3, and I want more Dungeons & Dragons video games to release, and the brand to continue to boom and grow and reach wider audiences. I'm down for all of that. Look, if I could give up my day job today and become a full-time Dungeons & Dragons content creator, I would take that deal in a heartbeat. I'm not in that position. I have to keep my day job, and all of the Dungeons & Dragons content creation that I have recently been doing is done in my free time. It consumes all of my spare energies for zero profit. In fact, I've spent a considerable amount of money just getting the tools necessary to create semi-professional looking content, and I've invested hours and hours learning the basic skills necessary just to be able to produce that content. So of course it matters to me when I see this corporate thinking damaging the Dungeons & Dragons brand, because, well, I'm hoping that Dungeons & Dragons will continue to grow and expand, and hoping that my efforts will reach that audience and also grow and expand. Of course there's a quid pro quo. But what this agreement does is completely remove the quid pro quo. It's literally stealing. I could justify it by saying, oh, $750,000 annually. That's not my situation. It doesn't affect me. You make $0 annually with content related to Dungeons and Dragons. You don't need to worry about it. And if one day I would ever have the problem of making $750,000 in a year from Dungeons and Dragons, well, hell, that would be one hell of a wonderful problem to have. But here's the thing. There's a clause in there that allows them to change that number to any number whenever they want with 30 days notice. So what if they in the future decide, hell, let's make that number $50,000 a year. Okay, let's continue to play devil's advocate just for a few moments longer. $50,000 in a year. Imagine I suddenly make that because my channel blows up and I'll be happy as Larry, right? $50,000 in a year is 3 times what I make now. So, okay, from that 50,000, I have to pay taxes, of course, so that's going to bring it down to, what, 35,000. And then I've got to give 25% cut to Wizards of the Coast. So that's 10,000 for them and 25,000 for me. That's still more than I make a year. So, as I said before, if I could make the same that I make now with Dungeons and Dragons, I would take that deal. But here's the thing. There's another clause in the OGL 1.1 that says that at any moment, Wizards of the Coast can look at whatever I've created and decide to just make it their own. They can take it from me, repost it, repackage it, wholesale, exactly what I did word for word. They could take that and not have to say please or thank you or ever offer me a single cent in compensation. And that's where I get intensely offended. I'm not delusional. I know that I'm a nobody, and I know that I'm way too far beneath Wizards of the Coast notice for this to ever genuinely, truly affect me. But it's the principle of the thing. The idea behind this clause is so rancidly evil, so out of touch, so greedy, that Wizards of the Coast genuinely deserves all of the kickback and criticism that they're receiving from the fandom and from the community. It's literally why I'm making this video. Now, let's just imagine for a second that I'm creating something of interest to Wizards of the Coast. Let's just pretend. I have a monthly subscription to Midjourney so that I can create the royalty-free images that I use in my video editing, to create the locations, to create the characters, to create the magical items. I have bought the universal license for the virtual tabletop I use, Fantasy Grounds, so that none of my players that I invited to join the campaign would have to buy the program themselves. I have bought, well, I've collectively bought with my players, they've also bought modules to run the campaign, the Spelljammer campaign that we're running, the Spelljammer module itself, several other modules, the Monsters of the Multiverse, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, another one that has the Leonin race. I can't remember what it was, the name of it off the top of my head, but several modules we've bought just so that everyone could comfortably make the characters that they wanted to play in this campaign. One of my players has boosted the Discord server that we use to run the game, just to get a higher video quality and audio quality on the streaming of the cameras. Several of us have bought new microphones. I've bought a new webcam, this chair that I'm sitting in to be able to not destroy my back from sitting hours in front of the computer editing. The editing programs themselves, Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere Pro, the countless hours that I've spent learning these skills, to learn how to use OBS Studio to stream, to learn how to stream on YouTube, to learn how to create small animations to make the recaps that I make for each weekly episode. The time spent learning how to edit audio and video. Not to mention the time spent actually sitting down and editing and creating those animations and editing those videos. It's hours and hours and hours of my spare time that I've spent until late in the wee hours of the morning investing in all of this. And for zero compensation, literally for the love of it, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I've chosen to do that. But then, this clause says Wizards of the Coast has the rights to ignore all of that and come and take anything that I've created D&D related and make it their own, repost it as their own, with no conversation with me, with no request or permission by me, with no compensation for using my creations, and that, no, I'm sorry, that's a hard no. That is not okay. And all you have to do is then project that onto the hundreds of content creators that are in the same position of me, that are trying to throw their hat into the circle, putting all of this effort, and then just having to agree that Wizards of the Coast can take their creations and it's theirs, or the big players involved who've gone through all of that process that I'm going through now after years of effort and gathering community support behind them with great third-party content creations that they've made themselves with their own creativity, their own ideas based on a game system, but it's all their own original ideas and creativity. And now that they've achieved a point of success, they're successful. Wizards of the Coast thinks that they can come in and say, I want a bite of that pie. And if you don't give us a bite of that pie, we can just take it anyway. That's not okay. That is vile. Taking a giant steaming dump on the heads of your content creation community is not a good idea. And I don't think legally they have a leg to stand on. But even if I'm wrong on that, and I could be wrong, I'm not a lawyer, even if I were to be wrong on that, it doesn't matter. They still lose. Let's have a think about that. Imagine their upcoming movie is successful. Let's just say it's not cringe. And the planned D&D TV series and the D&D universe that they want to create is successful with Paramount Plus. Let's imagine it creates 1 million new fans who suddenly find an interest that they want to try out this Dungeons & Dragons tabletop game. How are they going to do that exactly if their community has turned against them? Where are these people who have an interest in D&D going to find games if all of the people from their community now hate them and have gone to other gaming systems and found other things to do with their creative energies? Okay, so sure, there can be some people who will be interested in becoming dungeon masters and figuring it out themselves amongst them, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's not an easy thing to get a group of 4 or 5 people together on a regular basis in today's busy society and keep them together as a cohesive group over time, and to learn all the rules, put it all together, guide everyone to have a positive, fun experience, like the kind of experiences that they're seeing Critical Role or Dimension 20 are creating for these very talented actors and Dungeons & Dragons players. So they've already got like these really high expectations of what Dungeons & Dragons is supposed to look like. At the very least, they've seen the very animated Dungeons & Dragons games from Stranger Things, what that looks like. So there's already a huge amount of pressure on a novice DM, and you think that your lackluster starter sets is going to guide them to create this wonderful experience. No, they're going to have to learn from other experienced players. Who are the other experienced players? That's your D&D community, the one that you just took that steaming dump on. And if they hate you, where are they going to direct all of these new curious players? What are they going to talk about? They're going to talk about how you treated them. And they're going to direct all of this new interest away from your company instead of back into it. It's creating a losing cycle for you. It's been talked about by people who are more knowledgeable with the law than me. But there's already a legal document that has future-proofed the continued use of the open gaming license as we move forward. We don't need your new 1D&D products. We can carry on with the games that we've already created. That's what your CEO doesn't understand. We don't need you. You have to make us want you. All we need to play Dungeons & Dragons is a pencil, a rubber, a piece of paper, and some dice. We can get that from the stationery store. There's something wrong about this. Let's say Wizards of the Coast can legally cancel the future-proofed open gaming license and replace it with their 1.1 tyrannical, draconic, disgusting version of the open gaming license, which is not an open gaming license whatsoever. It's a gaming license. That is going to be fought out in the courts. If they go after large companies who are making significant amounts of money, it's going to be fought out in the courts. If they actually dare to take someone else's work and publish it as their own, to literally steal Dungeons & Dragons content creator work and publish it as their own, that's going to be fought out in the courts. And it doesn't matter who wins that legal battle, because that's going to be fought in the courts of public opinion. It's going to be a absolute shitstorm 10 times worse than what's already happening now if that goes to court. It's going to damage their reputation even further, and it's a lose-lose situation for them. If you lose in the court of public opinion, you lose your customers. Your customers will go somewhere else. Your customers, Wizards of the Coast, are mostly dungeon masters. They're all creatives. We're all creatives. We don't need your game. All we need, as I mentioned before, is a pencil, a paper, an eraser, and some dice. Everything else is superfluous. You have to make us want to buy your products. And that's not going to happen if you treat us like we're your cash cows. That's not going to happen if you treat us like we are your servants who must obey your unfair terms that give you all of the powers, all of the rights, the money, while we have to say, "Mother, may I," and "Thank you for the scraps that you allow us to eat from under the table." We love D&D, but we don't owe you, Hasbro, or Wizards of the Coast, a love or a loyalty. That's earned. So back up on this one, Wizards of the Coast. You made a mistake, and continuing along this path of corporate motivated cash grabbing is not going to be the win that you think it is going to be. When a fandom loves the company that produces the material that they love, they are met with huge success. Look at Elden Ring. When a company doesn't care about its fandom and stomps over their community, well, they lose their community, and that never turns out well for them. Ask Netflix about The Witcher. Ask Amazon about The Rings of Power. I'll tell you how important the fandom and the community is. With the ambitious projects that you have on the horizon, you need the fandom and you need the community now more than ever. So, yeah, you really need to just back up on this one.